Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Dr. Ana Sofia Ore, and I'm a general surgery resident at BI Deaconess in Boston. I'm also the co-director for the Latino Surgical Society Inside the Operating Room webinar series, and I want to give you a warm welcome and thank you for joining us today. The Latino Surgical Society was established to cultivate, nurture, and support the advancement of Latino surgeons, and today's events in line with this mission. We want to thank our institutional members who have supported LSSS, but also the faculty and trainees at their institutions. Lastly, we want to thank all of you, our members, for supporting and believing in the Latino Surgical Society. Tonight, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Benjamin Zendejas for the 14th installment of our series. Dr. Zendejas grew up in Mexico and obtained his medical degree at the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara. He obtained a master's degree with a focus on surgical education at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where he also completed a postdoctoral research fellowship. He then completed his general surgery training at Mayo Clinic. He later moved to Boston Children's Hospital to pursue his pediatric surgical training, where upon completion, he joined as faculty. He is the surgical director of the Esophageal and Airway treatment program and the co-surgical director of the Vascular Ring Program. He's clinically interested in improving the care of children with esophageal and airway diseases, thyroid and other endocrine surgical entities, colorectal disorders, as well as other general surgical conditions in newborns and children. His academic and research interests focus on designing and implementing methods to enhance the training and assessment of surgical trainees. First of all, welcome, Dr. Zendejas, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm excited.
I also wanted to introduce our moderator, who will be joining for this 14th Inside the Operating Room series. I would like to welcome our session moderator, Dr. Maximiliano Servin-Rojas. Dr. Servin-Rojas grew up in Mexico and obtained his medical degree at La Universidad Autónoma de Morelos. He completed a general surgery internship year in the National Medical Center Siglo XXI before deciding to pursue surgical training in the United States. He then spent a year as a research assistant at the National Institute of Medical Sciences and Nutrition at the Autonomous University of the State of Morelos, where he participated in research projects under Dr. Zendejas' mentorship. He's currently finishing a postdoctoral research fellowship at the Department of Surgery at the Massachusetts General Hospital. Welcome, Dr. Servin-Rojas. Thank you so much for joining us.
Dr. Ori, thank you so much. Thank you so much to Dr. Romero, to Dr. Ortega, and to Dr. Bautista for organizing this great event. I think it makes a huge difference. And I cannot think of anyone more deserving of this space than my mentor, Dr. Zendejas. But well, without further ado, let's start with the questions. Dr. Zendejas, why don't you tell us a bit about where you come from and why did you decide to pursue medicine?
So I was born in Mexico City. I spent a little bit of time there before my parents chose to move to Michoacan, which is a state in Mexico, kind of more on the west coast of Mexico, in a small town called Zamora. And so I grew up there, not entirely rural community, but definitely a small city with really not a lot of background in medicine. I really didn't have a lot of family members in the field, as some often do. My parents were in the social sciences. One was an anthropologist and the other was a sociologist. And so it really wasn't something that I had in mind early on, as some do. I think the story is kind of funny in that I had some exposure to healthcare through high school in terms of just some dental hygiene and public health sort of classes that we had, but nothing really strong. And I remember doing an exam for an admission to one of the universities in Mexico, and I did well on the exam. I initially had applied to computer sciences or something like that. It was sort of like the boom of the internet era, and I was good with computers, and so I thought I wanted to be something with computers. And when you go and meet with the counselor to get the scores, he said something like, well, you did really good, so good enough that you can go into medical school. And I thought about it for like 5 seconds, and I just said, well, sign me up. And at first it sort of seemed sort of silly, but there was just something in me that just said like, sure, why not? Let's try it. Like, why am I wanting to learn about a computer when I don't necessarily understand my own body? And so essentially curiosity was sort of what took me into medicine. And then after that, the rest is history. I'm glad I liked it and I followed my hunch. But it really wasn't a plan that was sort of laid out and followed carefully. It really was a hunch and an intuition. And so that's sort of the story.
Oh, that's really great. And I think it's actually that curiosity what makes you a great clinician in the end, and also a great researcher. And something that I'm very curious is about your educational journey. You were doing medical school back in Mexico. And at what point did you decide to move your career to somewhere else, like, for example, the United States?
Yeah, I don't know that there was a single point in time. Again, maybe a lot of my choices tend to be not necessarily the most well thought out or planned, which sort of highlights the fact that not everything has to be super planned in life. So I went through medical school in Mexico, having the opportunity to have done some education in the U.S. because I'm a U.S. citizen as well. My mom's from the U.S. and so I had some sort of bilingual, bicultural background, and I would have lived a few years in the U.S. here and there. So I had a crux in my education where I could have gone to college in the U.S., but I decided to do medical school in Mexico. A lot of it had to do with just like my friends were in Mexico, and I really wasn't sort of thinking 20 years down the road, which may have made things easier if I had done things in the U.S. to start, but not necessarily. And so the short answer is I think the opportunities going through medical school in Mexico were great in several ways, but as I was getting toward my internship, which tends to be like the 5th year in medical school training, after you've done your sort of 4 core years, you're still fairly young. I mean, I was able to start medical school when I was 17. And so, when you're 17, there's a lot of other things you're interested in as well. And at the same time, so I was essentially finishing medical school in my early 20s. And then is when I was like, well, you know what? I think I want to be a surgeon. I just enjoy the personality, but I also enjoy the research aspect to it. And I was somewhat disappointed when I started to see what actually was happening in the clinical world in Mexico. I was somewhat disappointed by several things that I think happened worldwide. I don't think this is unique to Mexico. And they actually may even happen in the US to some extent, which was what I considered a little bit of the self-interest of the physician as opposed to the best interest of the patient, meaning that it was almost like transactional, like a business for several physicians. That's the way they approached medicine. That was like, well, and I was sort of taken away from that model of care, and I wanted something where I really wanted to be paid the same regardless of what I did. So that wouldn't influence my decisions with the patient. And if you really wanted that to happen in Mexico, it's possible, but you get paid really bad because you have to work in the social social system of the healthcare system there. And so there's a lot of challenges with that. And so in a way, I was also interested with research, and I said, well, the surgeons in Mexico, there's very few surgeons in Mexico. There are academicians. They just sort of operate. Very few have this sort of research mindset. And so I think I was more in search of an alternative that made me consider coming to the US. And I did some electives, essentially. And was lucky enough to meet the right people, and the rest was history.
And what took you in particular to the Mayo Clinic?
I think I always was taken away when I was reading books in medical school that when research was, when they were talking about something and research was, they would say, okay, well, maybe Dr. Thompson and so found this. But then whenever it was something from the Mayo Clinic, they wouldn't say the name of the surgeon or the physician. They would say like researchers from the Mayo Clinic found this. And I was like, I found that very unique. And I was like, well, where is the Mayo Clinic? You know, I'd had some knowledge of US geography, but I'd never been to Minnesota. And I was like, sure, why not? Let's try it out. And I actually ended up being there for my elective in January, a really sort of cold and snowy sort of month. And I was like, well, if I can tolerate this, I think I can make it happen. And so that's sort of what it was. It was more of a, let's try it out and let's see how life is there. And I really liked the model of care that they had. And I still to this day think it's a very special and unique place. So I was lucky to land there and have a good encounter with several different people that ultimately provided the foundation for the rest. So that's these sort of mentorship and relationships that I think all of you are working on or have.
And that's great to hear. And from my understanding, you also did your residency training in Mayo Clinic, general surgery.
That's
and
true.
There's like a big breadth of exposure to different specialties in Mayo Clinic. But what took you in specific to pediatric surgery?
At the beginning, I didn't really know that I wanted to specialize. I knew I wanted to be a general surgeon, and that's sort of what I enjoyed. I enjoyed the variety, and I really liked everything. I've always sort of been kind of good at sort of different fields, and so I really didn't want to commit early on to one specific area. And for a good chunk of time in the first years of training, I thought I was just going to be a general surgeon, and I kind of really enjoyed that. When I was a third-year resident, I had the opportunity to do my first series of rotations in pediatric surgery, and it became evident that I felt fairly comfortable in that setting when a lot of people don't feel comfortable in that setting. And I found it very, in a way, challenging and good, and at the same time very rewarding, and it sort of puts things in perspective for us, because however bad you think you're having a day or however tough you think you have it ahead of yourself, like these kids that get these problems and need an operation or have a problem, there's just so much more. And so the strength of character and their resilience and it was just something that I was in awe and admire. At the same time, I found the pediatric surgeons were sort of like the happiest that I had found, and like the most like upbeat sort of type of personality, and also amazing technical surgeons. So I was really struck by personalities that I met and amazing mentors where they had this sort of human connection, really enjoyed what they were doing. They were really happy. And I think that just comes with the joy of taking care of kids. That was sort of a lot of the impetus to go into pediatric surgery.
Thank you, Dr. Zendejas. And you have been mentioning repeated times of how important were mentors during your career. So can you mention some of those great role models and mentors that help you get through the path?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're countless. I think that the very first, I think that was very instrumental in everything was David Farley. He used to be the program director at Mayo Clinic, and he was my research mentor for a couple of years there. And he was somebody who was very, very sort of not necessarily tough, but he was a bit of poker face, so you never really knew if he was happy or angry. But he was such a great role model in every sort of sense of the way. He really embodied the sort of Mayo model of care in every sort of way possible. He was an excellent surgeon, great teacher, had a passion for teaching that was amazing, and really was curious as anybody you can imagine. He really always wanted to know why and truly try to understand the situation. And so I think that he was very instrumental in opening doors for me and really believing in me and encouraging me to be better, pushing me to be better, knowing that I could. There's another great mentor at Mayo Clinic as well, Mike Sarr. So Dr. Sarr was amazing in all sorts of sense of the world, and just more stuff, not just in academic, but also in, you get mentors for different sort of things, but eventually you get mentors for life sort of things, and just somebody that you can count on, know that you can talk to, and people that you can, talk about anything. So he was one of those. It really helped me with my writing skills, with my just academic endeavors, and really sort of believe in me as well. I took the time to mentor residents and researchers just like me, and really showed that he cared. These were very important people, really high up in the sort of food chain, if you will. But they took the time to out of their day, sit down with you, have a cup of coffee, really made you think that they were there for you. And so he was very humble. He taught me how surgeons, despite how successful you can be, and this goes to any clinician as well, you must remain humble. And because that really grounds you to the essence of things, right? And so that was, I think, you always sort of think about, okay, surgeons, and when they're successful, they're kind of jerks and may not listen to me. But that's not the case. I think whoever is in that position is just not happy, or doesn't necessarily understand the situation. But so those were two instrumental mentors at Mayo Clinic. I've had several here at Boston Children's that I think it couldn't necessarily finish up the whole talk by just talking about each one of them. But I think early in my career that they were the best, I think, or not the best, but necessarily the more influential in terms of my model.
I definitely agree that role models are extremely important and mentors. And now you have the beta, and pretty much when I reached out to you, it was the same thing. You were already a pediatric surgeon. You were already an established academic surgeon, and you were actually the one that took the time to speak with me through the phone and mentor me through the whole process up until now, and that makes a huge difference for sure. And something I wanted to ask you, if you could go back in time and you could give yourself, your younger self, some advice, what advice would you give to yourself?
I think it's the same I give to everybody, and I may have given it to you. I think you have to, there's always going to be tough moments and moments of doubt of like, am I doing the right thing? Is this really for me? And I think just trust your gut and trust your intuition, and go for what makes you happy, and not necessarily what others want you to do, or what you believe others will want you to be. Because at the end of the day, the definition of success isn't what others define it as, it's what you define success as. And so you may see some folks that you may believe they are successful, but they're totally unhappy. And so I know that I'm successful, not from what I've achieved, but I'm successful based on the family and friends that I've developed. And for me, that's success. Everything else is extra. And so I think that those decisions that you make in your life, just follow your gut and think about you and obviously your family, and I think the rest is going to follow along. I mean, I think that be passionate, be smart, be persuasive, and persist, and if you really want something, go for it. I mean, there's nothing. Don't let people say no. There will be some folks that say no, but then you have to find a way to get around it and keep going. Don't get discouraged. There will be people that will say no, but if you believe in yourself, I think that's a big thing about that comes across significantly when you're interviewing, when you're like meeting folks. You have to have some degree of confidence in yourself, not to the point that it's cocky, and not to the point that it comes across as, oh my God, he feels so much about himself, but that generates trust. Because a lot of medicine, a lot of academics and research is about trust, and people believing in you that you can do it. And you have to sort of have that presence when you meet people and when you talk about things. Show them with words and with actions later that you can do it. If you're sort of timid and hesitant, that's not going to come across as that, that's going to work. So there's a little bit of that, unfortunately, that has to come across.
I definitely think it's great advice, especially us as physicians, that we care for people. If we're not able to instill that trust in the patient, it's not going to work out.
Yes.
And well, I pretty much is an international medical graduate. I know it's a tough road, but what do you think has been the greatest obstacle in your career advancement?
I think the greatest obstacle is that believing that you belong here, right? Believing that you are equally, even being an international medical graduate, that you are equally or sometimes even more capable than U.S. medical graduates or non-international medical graduates. I think that is the biggest obstacle we all face as international medical graduates. It's proving to ourselves, because if we can prove to ourselves and believe in it, then people will follow through. And you show it obviously with facts and actions. You'll do some research, you'll get some good board scores, you'll study English, you'll get better with your English, etc. And ultimately you'll meet people that will believe in you. And so I think that the quicker you get over that obstacle of believing in yourself, that you belong here, if that's what you want to do, or belong in that role, I think the easier it'll get.
And in your specific case, what do you think helped you to achieve to manage to surpass that obstacle? Was it your mentors?
I think it's a combination of things. I think that there's one phrase that I always come back to that my mentor, Dr. Farley, used to say, is luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And it really is so true. You have to prepare yourself. You have to work hard. You have to really, keep getting prepared, because there will be that opportunity that will come, and you want to be prepared for that one opportunity. So you become lucky. And I've actually been fairly lucky with a lot of things. And so I've worked hard and I'm preparing myself. And yes, some people may be more lucky than others, but that doesn't mean that you should lose hope, and you just keep trying to open more doors, keep getting prepared.
I agree. And you have said that phrase to me before, and it's actually one of my favorites now. And I keep telling everyone that phrase now, and I think it's totally true. What advice would you give to a surgical resident or a medical student looking for a mentor in their surgical career?
Yeah, I think that it's tough to pick a mentor. Sometimes actually mentors pick you. It's a combination of things. I think that there's been countless individuals who call me and ask for advice, and I am usually fairly open and try to meet with everybody. There are few who actually follow through. And so with sort of those entities, and so there ends up being a match between personalities. And so I think to find a mentor, yes, you first have to reach out and try. It doesn't mean that just because that particular mentor didn't we're best friends, or didn't really, jive, it means that that's a bad scenario. It just probably wasn't the right moment in time, the stars didn't align. So I think keep trying. And sometimes I think before you know it, that you may already have a mentor that you may not necessarily recognize as a mentor. And so I think just be aware of all those individuals in your life that have experiences that can nurture that. It doesn't necessarily have to be the chair of a department or the emeritus, highest ranking surgeon. It can actually be a junior surgeon. It can be someone mid-career, just somebody who has a common interest or a common thing that you're like, we connect on this, and can you have some time? We could chat about this. And if you follow up and you're persistent, I think people recognize, most of us have been through that. That's the thing that you have to sort of understand, right? Like, I was in your shoes, and I was in Max's shoes for many instances, and so we all relate to that. And so for us, it's really nice to be able to contribute back again, particularly for us who had good experiences with these entities of mentorship, and we know how valuable they are. For us, it's a pleasure to be able to do that. You're right; it doesn't work for every single interaction, but I think you just have to try.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I can also attest for that. It's pretty much looking for a mentor, reaching out, and eventually you're going to find a mentor that's going to be helpful for you. And in terms of international medical graduates, do you have any specific advice for them? Specifically, one, for example, like me, that was looking for a surgical academic career in the United States.
Well, I think the match process is challenging. That's changed a lot since I started. There isn't one single thing that will get you the spot. It's a combination of things. I often say what's kind of like playing, poker, or nowadays Texas Hold'em, or whatever it is that folks play. But you want to have a lot of aces in your stack of cards, right? And all those aces are, letters of recommendation, your scores for your USMLE scores, your transcripts, your. But I think of all, you want to make sure that it's balanced, right? Research counts, but it's not essential, but it's still part of it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what's going to open you those doors the best is probably going to be the letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendations from individuals here in the U.S. The best one is kind of like the holy grail, somebody that you actually work clinically with, and they can say, hey, this individual understands the healthcare system. Because if you have to think about it from the perspective of the program director of that program, the things that they want to know is, hey, can he or she speak English reasonably well to interact with everybody? Is he aware of or understands the healthcare system in the US such that it's not a culture shock for him when he starts and, oh my goodness, like in Mexico we do it this way and now here it's totally different. So being able to show those things either with electives, rotations, or letters of recommendations, that puts the mind at ease. And if they know you, or if you worked with them, or if you've done some research and they understand who you are, then that's the other thing. And so that's a lot of the barriers that we have to kind of tear down. There are some places, unfortunately, that just like don't take international medical graduates. That's just the way they are. And maybe that's not where you even want to be at, right? Because they're not going to treat you well. But there are a lot of places that do that. I think cherish that ability because it enriches the program and it adds, diversity to the program, and it really is a plus of the training environment. And so I think you want to look at those programs that have a track record of working with international medical graduates as places to really invest your time and energy to try to find rotations, electives. Even if you're outside of medical school, I think you really should still try to find some observership, something that you can spend some time and get a foot in the door and get a good letter of recommendation. I think that goes a long way.
I definitely thank you so much for the advice, and I think letter of recommendation is actually quite important. Coming from my experience, just to give a little bit of context, I'm applying right now, and Dr. Zendejas was one of the people who wrote a letter for me. And your letter of recommendation, I haven't told you this, but it continuously came out during my interviews. People were just surprised about the letter of recommendation. So again, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And why don't you tell us a bit about your life outside the operating room? Have you been able to achieve work-life balance?
I think work-life balance, yeah, it's a moving target. I'm sure that it comes and goes. It's definitely something we all work with to try to achieve. Some weeks are better than others. I'm sure that if you ask my wife and my kids, they think differently than what I think. I think a couple things to keep in mind. One is it's doable. Two, it's a matter of quality and not quantity. So you really want to be present and not thinking about other things or on your phone or really distracted. You really want to try to be present when you're with your family and kids and loved ones, and enjoy it and really take the effort or the time to cherish those moments. Because life goes quick, and we all have to really enjoy it as it goes. And so yes, I love to travel, and I love to sort of even to cook a little bit here and there, and I'm passionate about cars too, so I also have a bit of a hobby with cars, and so yes, you have to have something to look out other than what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that brings pretty much balance. And lastly, pediatric surgery is probably, if not the most competitive specialty fellowship. I mean, do you have any advice for residents that want to apply into pediatric surgery?
Yeah, I agree. It is a very competitive specialty, but I think it's sort of similar to just in general training in the U.S. You first have to get into get your foot in the door, and once you're in general surgery training, then that's the next hurdle, right? If you really want to do pediatric surgery training, it's just being prepared. You have to sort of do some research projects in pediatric surgery, probably do some electives and some rotations in some children's hospital, get to know people, go to the meetings. Actually, nowadays, something that's very important for fellowship, I would say, is getting involved in the societies. So there are kind of like what you guys are doing here with this society. There are more and more surgical societies are getting more and more interested in participation by young folks like you, because the way committees and societies work is it's all voluntary work, right? And we're all super busy. And so in a committee, there could be 20, 30 individuals, but actually the ones who do the work are really only 2 or 3. And the rest are just there for the name of the committee. And so those 2 or 3 usually tend to be the young ones, and the ones who have more time are the ones that get all the recognition and all that. Oh my God, hey, that Max guy is really good. He really always shows up, has great ideas. So you want to be seen, I think, and go to the meetings, present some talks, and really be part of that, so that you just blend right in. I think that's sort of part of the idea of you become a hot commodity because you're already involved in all these different projects and ideas, and so people fight for you if they see that. Yes, nowadays it's very common for folks to get a PhD, MPH, all these other extra sort of research and or even clinical fellowships to just stack up on their CV. And yes, you want to be able to create a story that highlights who you are and what makes you unique and what are you going to contribute to, but it's not essential. I mean, I think if you can craft a story or just be genuine and show this is why I'm Max, this is why I'm Anna, who are you and what makes you so unique? And yes, the competition's fierce. No, don't get me wrong. But I think that there's always room for somebody else, and so you think you have to work on that. And but mentors help for that as well. So I think you just need different types of mentors for the fellowship stage.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zendejas. And in pediatric surgery, just in medicine in general, what brings you the most joy and fulfillment?
Oh, so many things. I think that, being able to well, a lot of what I do is reoperative surgery and fixing other people's problems. I make my own problems too, and I often fix them as well. But sort of giving the hope to when there's no, or then there's thought to be no hope, and the thank yous. I think that I think that's sort of the biggest thing. Seeing kids who have struggled all their life, change and just say thank you. I mean, I think that's sort of, yes, we lose some battles with working with kids, and they're super painful, and that you will remember the name of that child for the rest of your life. But there are so many more wins, at least in the field that I am, and so I think that's what keeps me going.
Thank you, Dr. Zendejas. I guess it's time to move to the rapid fire questions, Dr. Ore.
I think we have a couple of questions from the audience.
Let me see. Okay, so we're going to ask you some questions from the audience. The first one is, what will you identify as your most meaningful accomplishment?
I think my wife and my daughters, to be honest. I think everything else goes away when you have a family and kids, and I think that's, to me, my definition of success. I think being able to show others that the path that I've taken is possible is another thing that brings me great joy. But in and of itself, I think that many others have done that before than I have, and probably to different extent, and probably harder circumstances than I had. And so I don't necessarily consider myself unique in that setting, but I do like the fact that I can be just one more example for folks who are looking up and seeing, okay, is it possible? And how did you do it? And so I think it is, because I was there before looking, saying, okay, how does that work? And so I think that's another thing I'm happy about.
I definitely agree, and it truly makes a difference. I can remember a couple of years back. Don't ask me why, but I was looking at the people that were doing fellowships in Boston Children's Hospital, and I found your name and saw you there, and I knew it was possible, and that was pretty much what pushed me to want to pursue this path. So it definitely makes a difference. The second question is, you work with multiple residents and fellows at Boston Children's Hospital. What qualities do you identify in trainees that tell you that someone is ready for the autonomy and responsibility of becoming an attending surgeon?
Yeah, so I think that there's another great phrase from my mentor who used to say, hungry dogs get fed. So be a hungry dog. And in a sense, it's like, yes, you want to be wiggling your tail and showing that you're hungry, but it actually means more like show that you're interested, show that you're committed, show that you have ownership of the patient, show that you understand the situation, show that you've prepared, that you read, that you've practiced. And I think that comes across. Unfortunately, and I may sound like an old surgeon now saying this, but the duty hours and the shift work mentality has hurt medical training to some extent, because it has created a sense of, oh, I'm not on call. Oh, that's not my patient. Oh, I'm not covering that patient. And so the ownership, when you're done with training, it will be your patient 24 hours a day, for the rest of their life. If you're a surgeon, they will consider them your patient. So I think there's a disconnect between what will happen when you're done training versus what happens when you're training with that regard. And so if you go beyond that, and I actually think clinicians who train outside of the US still have this sort of like, not necessarily old school mentality, but this work ethic, or this sort of like, oh yeah, we're here until the work's done. Or like, this is, I know everything about every single patient, even if I'm not covering them. I think that goes a long way, particularly with showing that you care and that it matters, because at the end of the day, it's the life of a patient, and truly understanding and showing that you care and that you're invested goes a long way.
I agree. I think it's pretty much putting the needs of the patient first and treating patients just like we wanted our family to be treated.
Yeah, and it's going against the stream of things, because it is sort of easy just to say, oh no, I just do what is the minimum that's asked of me, and keep going. But you will be noticed if you go that extra mile, and I think that's what being a hungry dog means.
Thank you, Dr. Zendejas. We have another question. Is, if you had to describe pediatric surgery in 3 words, what will those be?
I think it's innovation is one, because there's a lot of things that aren't really set in stone, and there's a lot of opportunity to develop new things. That's the first one. Number 2 is, I think it's resilience of the kids, particularly in as clinicians treating kids. It takes a certain unique character to kind of face that, but at the same time, that resilience teaches you how life moves on despite all odds sometimes, and so it teaches you to never give up. And I think the third word is just joy. I think it really, the privilege and the opportunity that we have to care for kids and their families is just amazing. And so if you embody that joy that kids have, that they really just, all they want to do is go and play. And they're sick, yeah, but I think they will trust you. And I think that joy comes across, and I think you have to sort of own it and really sort of, kind of like in a Patch Adams mentality, sort of spread the joy.
I think those are beautiful words, and I think pediatric surgeons definitely make a difference for the rest of lives of patients. Another question I had is a personal question. Pediatric surgery is also a pretty broad field. What got you into tracheoesophageal surgery?
Well, I think it was a combination of opportunity and the field that was a very unique area that at Boston Children's that had been developed as a referral center, as an expertise center. But predominantly, I was drawn to sort of this sort of thoracic, non-cardiac field for esophagus, airway. Those are challenging problems, and a lot of people shy away from them. And because it was also an area of the body where I still wasn't totally comfortable with initially. As a general surgeon, you're a lot more comfortable in the belly than in the head and neck or in the chest. And so that, I think, pushed me initially to get more comfortable in that area. And then after that, it just became a scenario where I love fixing tough problems and coming up with new solutions and And really, the mentors I found along the way in that field, Dr. Jennings is one of them, really sort of pushed me to go beyond just learning how to operate. The best surgeons are the ones that can think and get and actually adapt and get out of problems and actually learn how to say no to certain circumstances. And so it really becomes the fun part about surgery is the thinking, or the challenging problems. And yeah, the technical stuff you can teach anybody how to operate eventually with practice. But thinking, the best surgeons I do think are the ones that think the best and really take the time to tackle a challenging problem. So I think that just set itself up nicely for what I do.
Thank you, Dr. Zendejas. Do we have any other question? Okay, so I think we're going to proceed to our rapid fire questions. Are you ready, Dr. Zendejas?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. What is your favorite city?
CD?
City.
City.
City, yeah.
Jeez, I'm not that quick with rapid fire there. Okay, so it may not be a city, but there's an island on the outskirts of Puerto Rico, which my western Puerto Rico, that's called Culebra, and it's one of the most sort of amazing places that I've been to. And Culebra would be the place.
What is one of your distinctive operating room preferences?
What am I? Say that again. Sorry.
What is one of your distinctive operating room preferences?
Distinctive?
Distinctive. Yeah.
Oh, distinctive. Gee, I don't know. You'd have to ask some of the residents or fellows I work with. I don't know if I have one in particular. I really don't have anything that I consider unique. I'm sure if you ask them, they would tell you. That, I try to be sort of happy camper and yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so the next one is, what is your all-time most memorable meal?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know if there's a single one. One of my favorite dishes is a Mexican sort of dish called chile rellenos. And so that's sort of my favorite. They're hard to make, and very few people actually, I think, make them well. So I think that would be what I would go for.
Which kind? The one that have cheese inside, or the ones that have beans and
cheese? Yeah, no, I don't like. I know that some people make it with chiles en nogada or something else, but
yes,
I think they're like the plain with cheese, red sauce, that stuff.
What's the best advice that you have received?
Jeez, I think we've talked about a lot of them today already. I think that believe in yourself.
What are 3 things that you cannot live without?
3 things. I think love. I think we all need love in some way. And I think that obviously family is very important for that. And then the other thing is a goal or a passion or something that wakes you up from bed and kind of gets your day going. Like, what's your goal? What's your passion? What are you going to do that day? I think those are the 3 things.
What profession other than being a surgeon will you like to attempt?
Oh, race car driver.
Race car driver?
Yes.
NASCAR or F1?
I think F1 would be fun.
Usually, how do you start your day?
I wish I was healthier and I could do exercise before starting to work. But no, fairly straightforward. I love breakfast. I do believe in breakfast and a good cup of coffee, mostly espresso. So I think that's the basics.
I have another extra question here. I want to know if it's actually true. Someone told me that when you were a resident, you would run marathons post-call. Is that true?
I did some of that, not a full marathon, but I did do some training.
What is the best gift that you have ever received?
A gift? Geez, I think the best gifts are just like the ones that are not expected, and mostly just like the thank yous and the smiles and And so I don't necessarily think that a monetary or tangible gift is significant to the point of, I prefer a good old thank you, and an encounter like that means much more.
Thank you, Dr. Zendejas. I think that was our last question. Do we have any other question from the
I think there's one last
audience?
questions from the audience that just came in. And I can read it for you guys. It says, what can you tell us about the first years in the OR as a surgical resident? And that's from Jorge Torres.
That's a great question, because, and I think I love this, I'm glad we brought this up, because at the beginning, you as a surgical trainee, you have this doubt as to, am I good enough? Am I really going to be a good surgeon or not? And I had that doubt a lot at the beginning, in terms of like, you know, I thought I was smart and I know I could have all the knowledge and the decision making, but the technical part really at the beginning gets you, and you want to be good. And you're like, oh, gee, do I shake too much? Am I clumsy? Am I too clumsy to be a surgeon? And I tell this to medical students all the time, you don't have to be born being gifted. In fact, I actually thought I was very clumsy to begin with. And now I operate in like really tiny babies with like, you know, microscopic surgery kind of thing. And it's all about knowledge and practice and practice and practice. And so you will be clumsy, you will shake, you will be awkward, but don't let that deter you from getting beyond that initial stage of fright. You just have to relax, trust yourself, practice, 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 and exposure, 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 so it becomes routine. The first time you tied your shoelaces, you were terrible, right? But now you can do it blindly. So it's all about that. And I truly do believe it. Are some people more gifted than others? Maybe. But did Michael Jordan get that good by practicing 1 hour a day? No, he did it, you know, countless hours. And so the same thing with surgery. You have to practice. That's why you have to go beyond what is expected. And I'm not telling you to break duty hours, but you didn't hear that from me. But there is so much more to learn. And in those 5 years of surgical training, that you just need to be there. You need to be a sponge and participate any opportunity that you can, get onto it. Because time flies, and before you know it, you're going to be, oh shit, I don't feel unprepared. So you really have to be prepared, and you will be prepared if you pay attention and you're engaged. And I was a resident. I was probably the first class of the duty hour restrictions, and I feel that I still came out just fine. And so don't think that it's not possible. You just have to go that extra mile. But yes, I think that the advice for the first years of training is that. I think trust yourself, practice, go that extra mile. You won't be gifted right away. Okay, don't feel that you're a failure if you're not right away. You just have to practice more.
Thank you, Dr. Zendejas. Practice makes perfect, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank you both, Dr. Zendejas and Dr. Servin-Rojas, for joining us today for our 14th installment of Inside the Operating Room. It was wonderful to hear you both, you know, share your experiences. And I think that we really value that this was like a mentee-mentor relationship that we got to see live as well.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a great experience. And I think this kind of events make a great difference for people that are wanting to see if this path is possible. And I think Dr. Zendejas is more than a great example of that.
I also wanted to thank all our participants who tuned in this evening. And if you're interested in learning more about our organization or becoming a member, you can find us at latinosurgicalsociety.org and on various social media channels at Latino Surgery. And the recording for this event will be on our YouTube channel shortly. Buenas noches a todos, and thank you for joining.